Sweet. We are back. And today we have Steve joining us, amazingly. The founder of the movement will be joining us as a guest on audio to do some debates live. In the meantime, anybody that wants to join the stream as a live guest is more than welcome to do so. And we have our favorite guest on, amazingly, Shah, a very special guest. Good morning, Shah. Would you like to join and have a chat? Talk about extinctionism. Yeah, good to have you on board. We are actually waiting for Steve to join. But in the meantime, we have someone else. Hello, caller. How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Good, thank you.
I'm just interested in what kind of ethical perspective you have. I know you've probably been asked this a dozen times because you do this live all the time, I see. But just if you could summarize.
Yeah. So we're the only movement that has a zero tolerance policy on victims and suffering and extreme suffering, right? So that is the ultimate ethical position. There is no ethical position that's actually ethical where you're allowing or causing others to suffer, right?
Okay, so you say that other ethical positions allow people to suffer, and that's why they're not ethical.
And animals as well.
Yeah, obviously. See, immediately my issue with that is, so in your perspective, do you not value non-suffering in the same way that you value suffering?
You mean like pleasure and stuff and having fun? Surely you have some value, but it has zero value if it's at the expense of causing others to suffer, right?
Well,
It's
when you
like
say
so. For example, someone that's assaulting someone else, right? Should they be allowed to do it because they're having fun?
Well, absolutely not. But a lot of ethical frameworks account for that kind of harm relationship where you don't do stuff like that.
Relationship? You mean abusive relationship, basically?
Yeah. So, like, I think most people would say that you shouldn't do something that causes harm to someone else. And obviously, causing harm to someone else would be wrong, and that's why you know they would it wouldn't be permissible under most ethical frameworks.
Well, I mean, most ethical frameworks, every single one except for extinctionism, permits unlimited amounts of extreme suffering and victims so that others can benefit, which is terribly wrong.
How do you mean?
Well, that's the current system that we live in, right? The vast majority of life that gets born here suffers terribly, has a cruel death, a cruel life. It's awful for them, and people are willing to allow this to keep happening, and they don't see a problem with it.
Well, yeah, because we're still in the progress of working towards a world that has minimal suffering, um, or at least right now, if you look at just simply evolution and nature itself is inherently suffering inducing. Where you have to find food and shelter and to survive, etc. And where it's still kind of moving away from or moving towards a world with less suffering by enacting social progress. Like just 50 years ago, slavery was widespread and completely legal, etc. And then social progress was made, and now it's become something looked down upon in society. And so, what I'm saying is, history is always moving forward, right? Time is always moving forward towards something, and
And now we've got extinctionism. That's what we have essentially reached. The ultimate ethical position of zero tolerance policy on sufferings and victims, right? whereas other ethical positions allow victims and suffering, right?
Well, it wouldn't be the case that they allow it, more so that it happens.
No, they
Um,
do allow it, though. In fact, most people advocate for it continuing and not doing anything about it.
well, yes, but that's because most people generally support institutions and practices that harm other people. But, like,
Yeah,
for example, if you ask
that's the
someone,
thing, right?
if you ask, yeah, but if you ask someone, like, I don't know, say you ask some sort of utilitarian that what their view on animal suffering is, they could declare that obviously people should be vegan and etc. and that you ought not to do anything that results in the harm of another conscious or sentient being. And under a completely, like, let's say, perfect utilitarian world, you would have essentially no suffering in the same way you'd have no suffering under extinctionism.
In what way? How would that happen?
Just by assuming that everyone is following the principles
But if people follow the
declared by.
principles, then no one will ever suffer ever again. Don't you think that's a bit naive?
Yeah. Well, I think it's more likely than getting people to agree to mass extinction.
So you agree that extinction is more ethical, it's more correct, but you think it's easier to convince people to agree with something immoral, and which does injustice to the victims, basically.
I wouldn't say it's immoral because even under the utilitarian world, you wouldn't. If everyone followed it, like
But you
your
are saying it's
contention,
worse and less ethical, but it's easier, right? Now, just because something's easy doesn't mean it's what we should do, right? For
yeah,
example, people fighting against slavery constantly had people saying, "Oh, this is too hard. Can't we just give them pillows instead of ending slavery? You know, just reduce their suffering a little bit." And obviously, that was never acceptable or good enough, which is why they said no. We have to completely end this awful system. And if you're essentially encouraging people to adopt a worse system, then you're doing them an injustice, and you're doing the victims an injustice as well.
yeah. But what? So assume a complete. So let's say a perfect utilitarian world where everyone follows the rules and there's no suffering versus a completely extinct world where there exists no one um, to suffer. What's the difference?
There's no realistic way without extinction to have zero victims and zero suffering. So, our current system is every life is forced into existence. That's a bad thing. And then they suffer as a result. And that's a really bad thing. And for many, if not the majority, they'd be much better off not existing. So stopping them from being forced to exist in hell-like conditions is the only ethical thing that's worth fighting for, and anything else is not good enough.
So okay, I'm just gonna like ask my question again because I feel like I didn't really get an answer. So I'm saying between the two worlds, regardless of what's more realistic, or the practicability of it, between the two worlds, like you have this utilitarian world where everyone is follows the principle of not causing harm to anyone, but there is also pleasure that aggregates and etc.
But how does that
Versus
apply to animals? Animals are the vast majority of the population, so how does that apply to them?
because they would be part of the people that you're causing harm to, so you wouldn't. So you
Animals
follow
aren't people in that sense, right? They're
util-
animals. Okay, so that they can't follow
utilitarianism.
rules. They can't
Yeah, yeah.
understand rules.
No, but that's the whole point of utilitarianism doesn't index the moral value to people in a sense, or to humans specifically. Most utilitarians talk about conscious well-being, and so animals would be included because they would be sentient creatures that feel and suffer, that have the capacity to suffer.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
and so
would it prevent suffering as fast as possible, and forced existence? Because extinction is essentially the only way to do that, right? I mean, you wouldn't want to be an animal yourself, would you? It's an awful experience. And you wouldn't want to be a baby animal being eaten alive. You'd rather have that experience prevented and the entire existence that was forced upon you in the extreme suffering prevented, right? If you're going to be born into hell, you'd probably rather not be born, right? So unless your utilitarianism is going to include that, then I'd say it's not good enough.
Okay. I think I understand your point. Like you're saying that even like if humans followed all the rules. So wait, so I'm gonna repeat back your kind of position. So you're saying that even if people follow the rules, there would be still suffering in nature because animals would hunt each other, etc.
Suffering is in nature, and the worst suffering as well. So
Yeah, yeah.
you're a drop
Okay.
of emotion here, really. You can't just
Yeah.
focus on humans. They're the minority.
Yeah, yeah. Um, okay, that's interesting. My issue with that is, do you think that, so do you measure kind of suffering in any way? Like, would you say that stubbing your toe is worse than, I don't know, choking on something?
I mean, what kind of question is that?
Do you, because if there is a level of quantification to it, then I would ask to you, well, then how does it compare to the aggregate good or the pleasure quantity? And how do you determine that X amount of suffering is worse or inherently worse than X amount of, or the same amount of pleasure?
So, extreme suffering is so bad that it's unacceptable, right? And essentially, the existence and life and fun that someone's having doesn't outweigh the prevention of extreme suffering, right? So, for example, if I had to give up my life in order to protect someone from being sent to hell, I would do it because my life isn't worth more than their safety from that horrific and extreme, terrible suffering and nightmare experience, basically. Okay.
Wait, no, no, I think so. I wasn't talking about that. I wasn't talking about that. I'm asking you, in your mind, is all suffering equal, or do you have some sort of quantification?
Right. I mean, that's kind of boring, dude. Obviously, not all suffering is equal. That's just a ridiculous question, right? An insane question, I would say. One that's a waste of time. That's just silly. Obviously, not all suffering. Hello, Sarah. How you doing?
Hi, could you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you better today.
All right, yeah, sorry about that the other day. So I guess what I'm most interested in talking with you about is specifically on the human front because I think there's a lot less data on wild animals, unfortunately. Um, so I I hear that your premise is basically that no amount of like positive experiences can outweigh the negative of extreme suffering. That's correct, right?
Yeah.
I think I fundamentally disagree with that premise. And you could see a lot of polling data for most people. You can see that, I mean, especially in countries like, modern Western countries and everything, but even all over the world, most people are relatively satisfied with their lives. And you can ask them that even at times when things aren't going so great. I believe this was even true during like the different financial crises and everything. Most people still view their as being a point to living. And I wouldn't say it's just pleasure either. That's like a positive experience. I think, there are a lot of like positive states of mind that I wouldn't exactly describe as pleasure, but maybe just like motivational. You know what I mean?
So is it okay if I, beat someone up because I get pleasure out of it?
No, because that causes net suffering. The
Right.
amount of pleasure that you get
I
is
mean, so that's what
probably a
extinction
lot less than.
is about, right? It's just basic ethics and morality. It's saying it's never okay to let or make others suffer for benefit and for pleasure, right? So
I mean, in terms of direct
essentially, the
victimization,
pro-life
yeah.
position is just
But in
finding
terms,
ways to
what'd you
defend.
say?
The pro-life position is just one of desperately and
Hello?
hello, can you hear me?
I'm sorry.
Yeah. So
I could hear you now. Sorry, it was breaking for a second.
the pro-life position is one of desperately trying to find excuses for allowing others to suffer, right? Which is
So
terribly
so this
wrong.
is that's a
Which is terribly wrong
so
to the
that was a
victim.
logical jump.
It's terribly wrong to the
So that
victim
was
who suffer. Okay. So I think you'll have to try again when your internet's working and your audio. Okay. It's terribly wrong to the victims that suffer, right? And the suffering that you're condemning other life forms to be forced to experience has no upper limit, right? Necessarily on how bad it can be. In the mind of the oppressors like yourself, who are, by default and irrefutably condemning others to suffer, saying that there's balance, the lucky ones get to enjoy it, so we should make others suffer. It might be okay for you and the oppressors, but it is always terribly wrong to those essentially your slaves, who are forcing to exist and to suffer, basically. So you don't need the fun. You don't need the freedom to go around and play football. You don't need it, right? It's nothing bad really happens if you don't have it. In non-existence, there is no pain, there is no suffering, there is just safety from suffering. There's no bad experiences there, and so do you need to avoid that? It may feel scary, but I would say that's it, really. There's no sort of desperate need to cling on to life, and nothing bad that happens afterwards. Again, it's scary, but that's about it. It's not worse, losing that privilege isn't worse than essentially what you are condemning others to, which is extreme suffering, a life of effectively hell, and extreme suffering that in your mind you're probably trying to find ways to excuse and to downplay because it makes you feel more comfortable. But actually, if you're not thinking from a selfish perspective like that, then you would try and not downplay the suffering of the victims that you're happy to condemn. And instead, you would try and think of them in a responsible way, which is considering how bad their suffering might actually be, how extreme it could be, the worst case scenario. But instead, the oppressor mentality essentially uses the best case scenario at all times, which ignores the real victims and downplays their tragic experiences. Hello, how's it going? Oh, they're just loading. No, not loading. Let's try somebody else then. Let's have our next guest. Hello, how's it going?
Hey, I'm doing good, man. How about you?
I'm good, thank you.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, loud and clear.
Okay. I don't really have an argument or anything. I'm just kind of curious. So you're just completely anti-human?
No, it's anti-suffering, and actually, humans would be the last ones to go. So animals can't help themselves; they can't end their own suffering. So it's our duty to cause animal extinction, for as much life as possible in the universe, if possible.
So Well, I was going to ask, like, so in the way you see things, you think essentially just getting rid of life is a good thing?
We would say it's a necessary thing for
And
for the victims who are forced to exist and to suffer, hell-like, terrible tragedies. Basically, lives worse than knowledge.
and okay, so how do you plan on getting this to happen?
So yeah, we have a movement. We're growing the movement. We're doing activism. We're getting the message out there. Doing everything we can. Researching. Working to make it actually happen means working on lots of different fronts, lots of different avenues. Growing the movement is one of
So
the main ways.
okay, so what happens if this plan, so essentially you're referring to, or you're relying on rhetoric, right? Trying to convince people.
I mean, I would say that most people that we're trying to get to join the movement won't really massively need rhetoric in a sense. I would say that most people that have joined the movement, very quickly understood that suffering is bad and should be stopped at all costs, and that we should have a zero tolerance policy on victims of extreme suffering, and that it's wrong to do otherwise. Right? We should essentially end suffering as fast as possible for the sake of those that are suffering, because they need it urgently.
But so, like, the thing I'm trying to understand here is, so your goal is to end suffering, right? But suffering will always exist as long as humans exist. Therefore, you don't think humans should exist. My question, I guess, is like, what's, aside from if rhetoric fails, what then? To get people to join this quote unquote movement.
So yeah, there's lots of different things that we're working on, such as genetics. Um, for example, some of us are donating sperm to get more empathetic genes out into the world. It could take thousands of years to sort of overthrow the pro-life or pro-suffering society that we currently have. So it's expected to be a multi-generational project, just like the anti-slavery movement in a sense, right? So we're not expecting it to happen overnight, and we don't have all the answers yet, but we're working on it essentially. So anyone that agrees that we should have a suffering-free world is going to work towards extinctionism and to helping and growing the movement and developing it.
So, okay, so you said something about the sperm and all that stuff. So essentially, you're trying to create a race that, or a species that wouldn't cause suffering, right?
No.
So what was the idea behind this whole sperm producing people with less empathy or more empathy, however you want termed it? I'm just kind of curious.
So,
it's interesting.
The science shows that empathy is essentially largely genetic. So that's one thing that we could potentially do, is try and change the genetics of the world potentially empathetic. I'm not saying it's the best plan or that it's going to work completely, but it's something that we can be doing.
Okay, so when I say, like, if I was to say your goal is to make the human race extinct, that wouldn't be true according to this idea of the whole sperm thing, right? Your idea is to keep the human race, but produce a human race that's more empathetic.
Sort of, yeah. Now, I don't know if we can necessarily do that. We might have to take control and take power in other ways, but that is one way that we're working towards doing it. Our priority is animals, ending their suffering, because they are more numerous, far more numerous. They have worse conditions. They suffer worse than humans. So animals, and then potential space, universe life, and then finally humans. Yeah.
And so you said there's a movement. So, like, I guess I'm just curious, like, what happens if the movement can't get people convinced through rhetoric? Is there another method that would be used?
Yeah, so
i.e. Force.
Yeah, So, like I said, we are already exploring the genetics sort of avenues. We encourage our members to reproduce and have families. It would seem that the empathetic genes, which allow responsibly looking at the world and saying that yes, we should end suffering, they're in very short supply at the minute. So that is one priority, is working on that problem. But yes, force may be required. Everyone might not agree, but they fought a war to end slavery, for example, and everyone agrees that that was a good thing. So nothing's off the table in that sense, but obviously we want to do it in the most peaceful way that we can. But the victims will take priority.
Now, okay. As far as empathy goes, is empathy like, can that determine a good or bad? Like, is it a moral standard we can use to determine right and wrong? Empathy?
In a sense, yeah. For extinctionists, though, we're people that sort of look at the bigger picture, and essentially we're guided by what is the greater good, what is the best thing to do. So that's what guides us, and within that, it is preventing extreme suffering. Those that are suffering, extreme suffering, they essentially need help and take priority over those that are fine and just having fun. So, suffering is the worst thing in the world. And in the same way that you wouldn't, or hopefully you wouldn't send someone to hell so that you could go to heaven, we shouldn't allow any life forms to go to hell. And not if, just because some are having fun doesn't sort of make it okay, basically. Now, for those that want to keep having fun, realistically, they're going to keep having fun anyway, because we're not against humanity existing until the very end. But I think just in as a concept, essentially, people still struggle with it. But yeah, their continued existence is essentially not as important as ending and preventing extreme suffering.
Okay, and then, so as far as empathy goes, though, you would say it's an emotional response, right?
I would say that it is a way of understanding reality. I would say it's realism. So an emotional response would be getting angry at the idea of extinction, even though we're standing up for the victims. So empathy is just essentially a way to understand the world in a realistic way, in the same way that you might understand someone's getting angry, or you can watch someone having a good time and you can understand how happy they are. Empathy is about understanding and caring for the opposite, right? Looking out for those that are having terrible experiences.
So let's say, like, you empathize with someone in a situation and you get angry, so that's an emotional response. How do you know, though, that you're not just biased and you're empathizing with someone that you have a bias towards? And so, therefore, like, that empathy might be misguiding you and you're supporting something that actually isn't good because you're empathetic. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's a good question. So the thing is, it is irrefutable and undeniable that there are many lives that are better off not having existed, or better not having been born. So those are the worst off victims who are suffering the most and essentially need the help the most, more urgently than anyone else. Right? They are having the worst experiences and therefore require the most attention. But again, so it's irrefutable that those exist, right? That essentially hell-like experiences are being forced onto innocence. And so, yeah, it's not really acceptable to allow that, right? just so that others can have fun. It's yeah. I mean, you're asking like to what extent is it mathematically provable? I guess, right? And you know, for something on this level, that's I would say a reasonable request. But yeah, you know, once you understand how suffering bad is, I would say that it becomes just obvious that it has to be stopped at all costs, and that again, ending or you know, not continuing someone else's existence as the only way to prevent extreme hell-like experiences, it does work out to be the correct thing. Yeah.
Can I ask you something? Do you cause suffering?
Would we cause suffering if necessary? Right. I mean, we have billions of years of suffering on the line that requires ending as fast as possible. You know, for example, wild animals, their suffering has always been the worst. Their conditions have always been the worst on the planet.
I was just asking, like, do you cause suffering? Have you ever caused suffering?
Oh yeah, yeah. I think it's impossible to avoid causing suffering. You know, whether you're eating meat or even vegan food, that causes suffering as well. The phone you have, you know, is probably made by slaves.
Would you say humans? So would you say humans cause more suffering than animals?
No. So humans are actually a very, very small minority in terms of the population on the planet. Over 99.99% are wild animals. And again, they have the worst conditions and the worst suffering. You know, humans have, you know, shelter, you know, food, fridges. Animals just get chased by murderous animals all day and then eaten alive. They watch their family get eaten alive. You know, they have terrible experience. No medicine,
Okay.
parasites.
So from person to person, you mentioned that you've caused suffering, right? And you're saying suffering bad, and that suffering, people that induce suffering shouldn't exist. Now, following your logic here, shouldn't that mean like?
Well, I didn't say that
shouldn't exist.
It's more that there should just be a zero tolerance policy on suffering. And so no, by my logic, it wouldn't be better for me to not exist because.
So if there's a I don't mean to cut you off, but if there's a zero tolerance on suffering, yet you cause suffering, wouldn't that be a contradiction?
Yeah, I guess you could kind of say that. So there's a zero tolerance policy on suffering, except for any suffering that is strictly necessary in order to achieve a state of zero.
What's a necessary suffering?
But again, you know, if you go outside and accidentally stand on an insect or something, you might cause it to suffer, right? But it's impractical and impossible to avoid causing any suffering, realistically. Relying on suffering, right? You know,
I guess instead of making it go extinct, why don't we just learn how to endure through it?
Because, you know, not everyone's going to be able to do that. That's not a plan that's going to work for everyone. It's not a realistic thing. Animals can't really learn to endure suffering, right? You know, especially for the majority of them that die as babies. You know, having your eyes picked out by an eagle or something as a 3-year-old or you know, a 3-day-old, right? 3-day-old. You know, it's not something they can learn to endure, right? It's just an awful experience, harrowing, terrifying, extreme pain, misery, agony, fear, terror, right? So, you know, extinction is the most efficient way to stop this, right? And it's not causing, you know, a bad thing. It's simply stopping forced existence and the harm on it.
Okay. Well, I'll leave with this, but from what I gather, it kind of seems like you're promoting extinction, but you're going to be kind of the last one to go extinct, right? And isn't that kind of like cultish?
So, I mean, obviously, you need a vehicle for ending suffering and for helping others. So, you know, if humanity went extinct, then animals would just continue to suffer pointlessly for millions of more years, right? So it has to be done in a practical way.
I'm just saying for humans, like you're essentially communicating that animals go first, humans go second, but you've mentioned how you cause suffering and you're still here. So it comes off as like you actually don't want humans to go extinct. However, you're postulating that you want humans to go extinct. So I'm just kind of confused. It seems really contradictory and almost as if it's like a Jim Jones kind of thing. Like, here, everyone drink the Kool-Aid and I'll drink last. You know what I mean? It just kind of comes off that way.
Yeah. So the thing is, right, if our movement didn't exist, then we wouldn't be getting towards zero suffering or extinction, right? It is necessary for the activists and for humans to continue on for the sake of actually ending suffering, right? You can't just wish for it to happen. You have to do the activism and make it happen.
Right, and so if rhetoric fails, then you have to use force, right?
Potentially, yeah.
Yeah, so this sounds an awful lot like something, Nazi Germany did, right?
That's what the police do. That's what the North did in America, right? To end slavery. So you wouldn't say.
Yeah, but
how dare you?
Is that the right thing?
Well, yeah.
Right? Is that the right thing to do?
Well.
And how do you know that's the right thing to do?
So it would just come down to what's practical, right? If we knew we could win a war and that was the only way to do it, then sure, we'd probably do it. There'd be a lot of considerations. I'm not saying that we would just happily go to war. That would be kind of a last resort. But in the same way that the police use force to stop a criminal, I wouldn't say that it's a terrible thing by default.
Yeah, so it's like a pragmatic approach, right? Like, you think this thing works, so let's do it, but that doesn't necessarily make it the true thing to do, right? But the thing is, like, I guess, like, the thing I'm just confused by is, like, so you don't actually value your life or anyone's life. I guess, like, it's just like, if you're worried about suffering, couldn't it just be possible, like, and I'm not saying do this by any stretch of the imagination, but wouldn't it be possible, I'll just say from my position, wouldn't it, if I had your views, wouldn't it be possible that just unaliving myself would be the best option because I no longer have to suffer? Adopting your view.
That's a good question. So, the thing is that from our view and as taking on this responsibility, if we did that, it would actually cause more suffering. It would be a bad thing. Now, from a selfish perspective, non-existence is the ultimate safety from terrible things. But most people, like probably yourself, are willing to accept that risk for your own continued survival. Now, you could argue that is an irrational thing, and it actually is wrong. But that's something that's kind of out of our control at the minute. Anyway, pro-lifers, normal people, your average person isn't going to take on that sort of position. However, extinctionists do understand that non-existence is better in that sense.
I guess, like, my thing is, like, why try to promote the non-existence of anything? And I'm just speaking for humans because, well, we're human, but why promote the non-existence of human if other people, a majority of people, I think, are willing to endure suffering in this life to continue existing? I have my own reasons. Obviously, I'm sure other people do. Yeah. I'm not trying to get into a theology debate here, but
that's a good question. So, like I was saying, it's kind of a survival instinct thing. Humans are just animals at the end of the day, and an evolution designed us to sort of ignore and to not think about the dangers, but to kind of blindly continue on and to reproduce. So, it's that existence and the suffering that we're kind of blind to, because that would have gone against evolution, against propagation of the species. So,
but okay, let me ask you a question then. So, like, you're actually for, like, say, the serial murderer and all these things because they're actually doing a net benefit
no,
to your world, right?
no. So, firstly,
So you're against. Hold on.
Yeah.
But with that, so like, sorry, but so if you're against murder, yet you're willing to use force to impose your world, isn't that another contradiction?
and in the same way that the police might have to use a weapon.
Well, I'm just saying for you, like not what the police do, but what you would be doing.
That's an easy way to see that it's not a contradiction. But yeah, so we're against murder. We're against random acts.
So then you'd be for forced murder because that's propagating your position, right?
Not necessarily, and actually no, we're against that because firstly, every human.
Would you? Sorry, I don't mean to keep cutting you off, but would you be for like mass? I don't know if I can say it on here, but abortions. Like every woman just always aborting. Every time they get pregnant, just abort.
No,
no births.
No, so we support a strong and healthy and numerous, populous humanity, because humanity is the vehicle for ending suffering for animals, and also every human that exists prevents millions of wild animals from existing due to taking up land and resources that would have otherwise been consumed by wild animals. And thirdly, we're against random acts of violence and self-harm, because firstly, that again is bad for wild animals, so overall it's a bad thing. And secondly, it would cause chaos and destabilize society, so that would also be a bad thing. Make it harder to.
But is it to use force to cause extinction? Wouldn't that require chaos and random acts of violence?
I mean, not necessarily, right?
How not? I mean, that would then entail that we would continue to exist if we don't need chaos, unless you just do it in an orderly fashion and call that order, right?
Yeah. So we're willing to essentially get our hands dirty if necessary, but we'd rather avoid that. And actually, there may be many ways to essentially do it peacefully. So that's what we're going to prioritize looking to achieve, essentially. But at the end of the day, we still have a moral obligation to end and prevent as much suffering as fast as possible for the sake of the victims. In that sense, we wouldn't wait for 51% democracy agreement if we knew that we had a way to essentially achieve our goals faster than that, because that would be unfair to the victims, right? So the victims, the sufferers, take priority.
Well, I'd like to keep talking more, but I got to get going. I appreciate the discussion, sir, and you take it easy, all right?
Yeah, thanks for coming on, and yeah, I'll be happy to talk again. Take care.
All right, later.
That was a good chat. Let's have a look at the queue. Moving on. Hello.
Hey James, how you doing?
I'm decent. How are you?
I'm pretty good.
Good. What's on your mind today?
Oh no, I was hoping to pick up on the conversation because I don't know if we got cut out or you just kicked me for no reason, but I was trying to wrap my head around your view on suffering.
Yeah, let's get back into it. Sure.
Yeah. Because I was trying to, if I correctly remember, I was trying to word it right because I was trying to give you an explanation from the statement I meant, but I guess what I essentially came down to was that you're willing to throw away all those who have already suffered up to this point, as the women and men who have sacrificed so much, the animals that have unalived in horrible ways, as nature needs to learn, as it's still learning and still repeating the same mistakes over and over again. Because that's how we got here, right? We had to learn, unalive each other for thousands of years before we got to some cohesiveness of the society, to where we could even have the capability to grow the empathy and grow the compassion for one another. So it's
You're saying throw it away.
Throw it all away, and basically make all those lives absolutely pointless.
I mean, I would say that, they
I'm
work.
sorry.
Right?
When in reality, we're already heading in that direction anyway. Like, I would say your entire movement is completely pointless.
Well, I don't think we're really, you can say that humanity is headed in the direction of compassionately preventing forced existence and suffering. And that's why a movement does exist, right?
No, if you follow the trajectory, you could say, of how we're developing, whether it be technologically, whether it be through genetics or through our technology and all that stuff like that, the first thing to go are going to be animals, because once we learn to grow food from stem cells, we won't need them anymore. And as a collective species on the planet, we prioritize ourselves overall. It's why we, like I think in the conversation you said, that's why we control populations on the planet. I mean, we have pretty much got control of the entire planet when it comes to, like, we decide what species live, what species unalive. We unalive species to protect other species, and we, and so forth. Just all things that humans do, put it that way. But in the natural occurrence of technology and our numbers growing by day, animals are going to be a footnote and eventually not exist anymore anyway. They'll probably be one day simulations of what used to be alive for generations in the future to kind of admire and ponder, but they'll never get to see them alive, put it that way. However, with the human mind,
we're against we're against the sort of position of using the suffering of others for pleasure.
No, I wouldn't be using it, but it's a matter of time. And
well, no, that's
sometimes you gotta let time take its course. Otherwise, you take away the meaning of it. Is what I'm trying to say.
Well, no, you're trying to sort of obfuscate the truth, right? It's not a.
No, the proof. We're living the proof right now. It's not obfuscating. We are the proof. We're living in it right now.
Time, it's a question of choice, right? Do you allow others to suffer so that you can benefit, or do you help them?
Well, like I said, it took humankind time in order to even develop compassion and empathy. We didn't used to care about each other, nor did we used to have these bonds that we have that are so strong today. It took time. We had to learn as a species as we grew, and species around us, even in the animal kingdom, are doing the same thing. It's taking them a lot longer because we were kind of we call it the top predator, top species to come out and do what we do, kind of stunting the growth of all these other species on the planet. But because we are the dominant form on the planet, it's eventually going to be that it's just us, and everything will be a simulation at one point, or even us will be VR, where, suffering will be a choice. It'll be something that you actually go into a simulation to experience, because life gets so equally formulated in the future.
What you need to understand, Jack, is that there is no ethical way to use others and their suffering.
Not using it,
right? So there is no ethical system that says it's okay to allow and create suffering.
I just gave you one.
Yeah, but there is no actual...
Where suffering is a choice. It's literally an ethical choice you make to feel something.
Well, I mean, that's not real, mate, is it? You're living in a fantasy.
It's not a fantasy.
Yeah, an animal being eaten alive.
You don't believe in unplugging your mind? Or the fact that you can stop signals to the brain? Because what is suffering? Suffering is a feeling. If you're being eaten alive and you're in pain, it's because your body's sending signals to the brain, which we already know we can block. So you don't have to suffer being eaten alive. You'll be eaten alive, and if you can stop the chemical reactions in your brain that make you go, "Oh my God, I'm being eaten alive," well, there you go. You just ended suffering.
Scream, Jack.
What's that?
Why does anyone scream? Right?
Well, I'm saying if you can prevent the feeling, you won't be screaming. You'll just be eaten alive. That's it.
Screaming is a choice, dude.
What's that?
You think people choose to scream? They're like, I could just shut the pain off, but I'm going
to... that's why I said it's leading to that future. It's already on track for that, is what I'm trying to tell you. That's what you're not hearing.
Right,
and what you're doing is spitting on everyone who has suffered in order to start building toward that future.
That's not realistic, okay?
Why is that not realistic?
Babies and animals can't meditate, okay? That's not a realistic thing.
No, you said we have to do something about it, right? The ones that are capable, right?
But Jack, babies and animals can't meditate.
But you didn't say anything. You didn't say anything about babies and animals. I said the ones that are alive right now.
We have to think about the majority of the population and the worst off sufferers, Jack. You can't just keep fantasizing about the lucky ones who might be able to meditate their way through a surgery or something. A baby can't meditate its way through being eaten alive. Get real. Okay, it's not realistic. Let's have the next caller. Okay, working on it, working on it. Maybe it's not coming. Okay, so let's reflect on that. Babies can't meditate. That's obvious. A baby born with, extreme brain damage, for example, definitely can't meditate. Essentially, he's kind of arguing the transhumanist position, right? This comes up a lot, right, on my stream. You have extinctionists like myself who say, non-existence is the only way to effectively provide a guarantee of safety. And then you have the transhumanist position, which is saying, let's reduce suffering, allow the victims to suffer, allow them to be forced into hell-like experiences so that we can benefit and maybe some others can benefit. So it's saying, instead of ending and preventing their horrific suffering, let's use it. Let's allow it so that we can benefit. There will never be an ethical or moral or right way or correct way to do that, because that framework it's infinitely wrong, right? It doesn't actually limit how much suffering it's willing to accept most of the time. It doesn't have any sort of real mathematics to it. There's no point at which they'd say, okay, this is how much suffering we can allow for this much benefit. No, it's just saying, don't worry about the victims. Let them suffer. Make them suffer even, so that we have some undefined benefit in the future, right? It's crazy. There's no way to, logically say that we should let others suffer. It's just wrong. The only thing that is correct and right is to prioritize the victims and their suffering, and to not have a system where you say it's okay to use them, right? That is the sort of the mainstream position, which is wrong. It's an animalistic position of let's just have unlimited suffering and just ignore it so that we can continue on. But that's nature's position. That's an animal's position. A true intelligent life form wouldn't say, "Oh, you see that child being eaten alive? That's fine. That's acceptable." Condemning life forms to hell so that you or someone else can go to heaven. It's wrong. Using the suffering of others for benefit is never going to be acceptable. So, for animals, there's just no excuse, right? We can very easily control animal populations, reduce them, and prevent more of their suffering, their needless suffering. Would you want to be born as an animal? No, definitely not. Your conditions are automatically far worse than they are as a human, in every way, shape, and form. And especially, would you want to be born as an animal in the wild, where you're going to be chased for your life, hunted by murderous animals? If you've ever had a nightmare where you were chased by a murderer, right? Imagine that's real life, and it's every day, and it only ends with actually getting caught and stabbed or eaten alive, basically. It's not a life that anyone should live or have to be forced to live, essentially. Look. Okay, maybe try rejoining when you've sorted that stuff out. Let's take some questions from the chat. Does your ideology take into account the inevitable extinction of life on Earth anyway? Yeah, people ask this all the time. What about the end of the universe, the heat death? Life is going to go extinct anyway. But that doesn't help those that are suffering today and tomorrow. So, that's no, we should help those that are suffering today and tomorrow, and not just say, forget them. Their suffering might finish billions of years from now. That's not good enough, right? That's a crazy thing to say. So Jack's saying, I have a way to end all suffering without ending life, right? But you're talking about Buddhism, right? And even in the best case scenario of Buddhism and meditation, it still doesn't overcome the actual worst case suffering that you can experience, right? It might help you meditate through a stubbed toe, but it's definitely not going to help you meditate through being murdered or eaten alive, okay? And it's definitely naive to think that everyone is going to be able to benefit from that. The thing is, right, this is a very optimistic and naive position. And, it doesn't account for what can go wrong, the worst case scenario. It doesn't give any real 100% guarantee of safety. And that's what life deserves, 100% guarantee of safety from, a bad life, from extreme suffering. And again, extinctionists are thinking of, the worst case scenarios and the worst off victims. That's the responsible thing to do. Whereas the oppressors, like Jack, is essentially fantasizing about optimistic scenarios that completely ignore the reality and ignore the suffering of those that are suffering terribly, right? So the oppressor mentality is what humans have. It's the animalistic mentality of tribalism, discrimination, prioritize survival and existence at all costs, mindlessly reproduce, don't think about the suffering that you could be causing, just ignore the sufferers, focus on our pleasure and our benefit. So in that sense, it explains why we have a tribalistic world, we have racism, hatred, violence, we have wars, global conflict. It's the animalistic mentality. You have, it's easy to see, you have packs of monkeys, right? Maybe you've seen the clips where they're essentially at war, right? So they have tribes of monkeys, and they are extremely territorial, and most animals are very territorial. These are my resources, you're coming into my territory, I'm going to attack you viciously and probably kill you. Or, I like the look of your territory, I want it, I'm going to kill you and take it. So this sort of system of violence and system of using the suffering of others, allowing the suffering of others, it's a pointless system. No one's really benefiting. It's just nature, and nature isn't something that is spiritual or magic. It's just chaos, basically. We are complexity that arose out of chaos, because that is how the laws of physics work, essentially. But the suffering it causes is absolutely horrific, So, people don't really think of, so here's a good way of thinking about it. If I said, what's the worst thing that can happen, right? What is the worst thing in the world, the worst experience? A lot of people would say, if I die, that's the worst thing or something. But really the worst thing that can happen is prolonged and inescapable extreme suffering. So effectively hell, right? In hell, you can't escape, and you're just suffering so bad that it's, absolutely insanely bad, okay? Even most people thinking of hell kind of have a rose-tinted perspective of it. They think, maybe I'll, get a bad suntan or something. But, they don't want to think about how bad it would actually be and how bad it is in reality. A baby being, essayed to death, right? That is a truly terrible thing. An animal being eaten alive, truly terrible thing. Perhaps just as bad or worse, right? But that's the majority of the experiences on this planet, is baby animals being thrust into terrible conditions. They've got parasites, diseases, they're starving, they're freezing, there's no shelter, no safety, they're being chased by murderous predators, and this awful experience of, extreme, terrible conditions is ended only by an even worse experience a lot of the time of being eaten alive, often by multiple predators at the same time. Is that something you would want to experience? Absolutely not. If the choice was that or non-existence, I know what I would go for, right? In a selfish way, and I know what most people would probably also say. Yeah, I don't want that. I don't want to be chased by murderers for my entire life as a baby and then eaten alive. That's just obvious, right? If you had a choice between condemning your mother to that or just the safety of non-existence, I think everyone would definitely go with non-existence. So it's not really like that controversial what we're talking about. I think everyone should really be able to agree that, this sort of suffering is extreme, it's terrible, it shouldn't be happening, and people kind of struggle to understand this sort of existence bad kind of thing, right? Is it good? Is it okay to prevent a life form being forced to exist? Because again, every single life form that exists here was forced to exist, okay? Which is already a bad thing. But if we're essentially in hell, then yeah, we should try and stop new lives from being born into hell, right? That's just an obvious thing. Only the lucky ones at the very top are getting any sort of benefit or vaguely acceptable life out of this. But the vast majority of life on this planet is being born into, conditions that you wouldn't want yourself or anyone else to experience. And yeah, so extinction is a mercy. Non-existence is just a little bit scary and difficult to think about for most people. But I would say that they've probably not experienced anything like what the victims have experienced. So they're really in a position of extreme privilege and fortune, sitting in effectively ivory towers, looking down and saying, I don't know what they're complaining about, right? Again, it's the oppressor mentality of not empathizing with the sufferers, downplaying their suffering, excusing it, justifying it. If we know that lives are going to be forced into hell-like experiences that they would, definitely be better off not experiencing, then yeah, that is the worst thing. So, I would sort of challenge you guys to name anything worse than that. Can you really say that there's anything worse than condemning a life form to hell-like suffering that they can't escape? A baby or a child, they can't opt out, as people so grossly put it, right? And these oppressors are essentially opting them in to suffering, and then saying, well, it's fine, we might be able to benefit from it. Really, it comes down to people's desire to continue existing and benefiting, and to not do the right thing. If, again, like, you wouldn't send someone to hell so that you can, make money off of it or benefit. So why would you allow anyone to go to hell for that, right? And I think hell is a really good sort of analogy, right? Because it's extreme suffering, it's inescapable, there is no escape. And again, the vast majority of life born on this planet will die a painful death during childhood, statistically speaking. Wild animals are in the, insane numbers, right? Quadrillions, quintillions, sextillions, if not more. And most of them born each year, the way they will pass away is by being eaten alive or starving to death. And, these are babies we're talking about. So they don't get any kind of life or childhood. They just get extreme torture and a cruel death. Hello,
Hey, how you doing?
how's it going?
Pretty good. Um, I like that. Well, like's a horrible word. I think the idea of extinction is not a horrible idea on its surface. I'm just curious where your stance comes from. Is it morality, ethics?
Mostly empathy, I guess, and also understanding that it is the right thing as well. Yeah, most extinctionists like myself, came across the idea, and knowing and understanding how bad suffering is, it was easy to say yes, suffering is too extreme and too terrible to allow. We should have a zero tolerance policy, and to prevent as much suffering as possible as the priority, right? Those that are having fun and enjoying pizza, they don't need help and they don't need to continue eating that pizza. Whereas those that are being tortured, right, they need help very urgently, and they absolutely need, undeniably, to be helped and to have their suffering stopped.
If that's your goal, why wouldn't your goal to be to make a world like that then?
So there is no sort of suffering-free world without extinction. There's no way to have, animals running around killing each other without suffering, right?
But why not?
Because you can't essentially provide 100% safety from suffering for all life without any risk of it going wrong. There's no practical way to do that. And essentially extinction is already possible. It's much more, it's much faster, more efficient, and has a far higher success rate, which is, virtually infinite, right? If you don't exist, then you've got 100% chance of being safe from suffering. It's much more practical, much faster. It's already possible. Inventing essentially, immortality for every single last ant, and safety from every type of suffering, and even safety from a sadist coming and engineering a life form to suffer, or finding the thing is, like, medicine improves over time, but so do torture methods, so does our capacity to create viruses and stuff like that, right? So it's a two-edged sword, essentially, double-edged sword.
So that's all true, but I still don't see why you wouldn't. So, like, what percentage of people not suffering would be enough for you to be happy with it? Do you need to be 100% to be happy at all?
Yeah, we have a zero tolerance policy on victims and suffering, right? No one should have to suffer just so that others can have fun.
And you're vegan, right?
No.
You're not vegan, so you're not completely, like, pro this plan until it's done?
So veganism actually, once you look into it, causes worse suffering. The thing is that veganism essentially uses so little land and so few resources compared to animal agriculture, that it essentially allows for wild animals to occupy that land and suffer worse. So deforestation, for example, that essentially prevents animals from being forced to exist and to suffer there. And if you actually look at the statistics on how much land, agricultural land, is used for animal agriculture, it's actually mind-blowingly large. And effectively, farm animals do have better conditions than wild animals. They get euthanasia, they get medicine, they get shelter, they get safety, they get food. And wild animals occupying the same space will be much higher in number and worse in suffering. So actually, we have looked into it, and veganism, while it's a great idea, does actually at the minute cause worse suffering. So one thing that we would need to do is to reduce and remove our dependence on animals, have a world, a planet, free of animals, ideally, and
Agreed.
and essentially make it easier to be vegan. And so in a way that there's no wild animals suffering as a result. So yeah, it is a
So
good thing, but
would
just
that be a
not.
better starting point then?
Say again?
Would that be a better starting point then?
No, no. So the thing is, like I said, veganism causes worse suffering at the minute, right?
Oh no, I mean pushing towards everything being that.
Every Say again, sorry.
Pushing towards everything being veganism. No more animals.
I mean, the thing about veganism is that it doesn't account for suffering that exists outside of humans consuming animal products, basically.
Oh,
So,
I'm talking about the far future. I'm saying about cutting all animals out of existence.
oh yeah, I mean, if the thing is, yeah, I mean, if we could click our fingers right now and have a vegan world with
Well,
no,
obviously we can't click our fingers. Yeah, I'm not talking about magic powers. Yeah, I'm talking about a future that where we are working towards the goal.
yeah, like I say, part of our plan is essentially to do that, is to have, ideally a vegan planet. Yeah, but it's not going to happen by itself.
Agreed. No, I agree. So what are steps that you would think would work towards that goal?
Yeah, so the most ethical way to do it would be, if the planet was extinctionist tomorrow, we would, we'd have so many sufferers that they would take the priority. So it would be very urgent to remove our dependency on animals, make vegan agriculture easier or whatever. The thing is, if every animal disappeared from the planet today, the planet would become uninhabitable. So you actually have to do a lot of engineering and stuff to actually remove our dependency on animals for all types of things, including
That's why
pollination.
it can't be all at once. Yeah, correct. So
So
definitely long term.
yeah, so it's a big job. But yeah, we should have a suffering-free planet as fast as possible.
So I agree that the speed is better faster than slower, but how it doesn't have to be that fast as long as it's done correctly, right? Like in a way that is as humane and safe for other life that is going to possibly still exist.
Yeah, it all has to be done, in context.
Yeah.
If you again, like if we could, as fast as possible, would be a bad thing in some ways. Again, if all animals disappeared tomorrow, the planet wouldn't be habitable.
Obviously fail, fall apart. Yeah.
Yeah, so yeah, we can't necessarily do it as fast as we'd like in that sense. Yeah.
Do you think that there is a middle ground where there is a balance that could be met?
So there's no sort of, everyone kind of fantasizes about this balance. It is very common, but having a balance of animals and babies being tortured isn't a good balance, right? So it's not an acceptable balance. There has to be a zero tolerance policy on extreme suffering and victims and using their suffering for fun and for pleasure, right? They don't deserve it. They deserve better than that. They need not to suffer, whereas others don't need to have fun.
What makes the need for not suffering overweigh the need for people to have fun?
Yeah,
This sounds selfish, I know when I say it. I'm just curious what your thoughts are.
yeah. So I guess once you kind of understand how bad suffering can be, that's all it really takes to know that it's unacceptable. But most people are blinded from it by nature. Their brains are quite literally warped in a way by nature to be unaware of suffering, to not understand it, to downplay it, to ignore it, and essentially to devalue it. It's kind of an upside down mentality that creates an animalistic mentality of just focus on surviving and reproduce, and that's it, basically. It's not a logical or rational sort of mentality.
So maybe stricter rules on who can and can't breed, um, better tests to see where environments should be allowed to have it, things like that. Or would be stricter guidelines? Would that be a step towards the right direction, or is that too slow for you?
Yeah, I mean, there is no kind of world where we're happy to allow victims and suffering, right?
Yeah.
So, we have an absolute zero tolerance policy on it. And if that means non-existence because it's safer, then that's the right thing to do.
So what if we can have a zero suffering world in a 5% population?
I don't think it comes down to like population numbers, right? You could have the best life ever, but something terrible could happen the next day and change all of that. So there's always going to be some kind of risk, right? And people try not to think about it, but that causes suffering, right? Ignoring the risks.
I guess I'm confused then. When you say suffering, do you mean like purposeful suffering, or do you mean like accidental suffering as well?
All
Like,
types.
do you count like a loved one dying as suffering that shouldn't be lived through? 'Cause that's suffering, obviously, but that's
Yeah, so I mean, there's different types of suffering, and it's experienced differently by different people. For some people, that suffering that you mentioned would be so bad that they'd rather not exist, right? Or not, rather
they have
not.
that choice, right?
Say again?
They have that choice, though, right?
Well, no, you don't really choose if you're suffering or not. It's not like a
Oh no, to keep existing. Sorry, not if they suffer or not.
Yeah, no, it's also a myth that you can just opt out. It's actually very possible to experience extreme suffering and to not be able to overcome your survival instinct and fear in order to make the leap to opting out.
Doesn't that mean they want to not opt out then at that point?
No, so not everyone can make a rational decision about it, right? It's a very extreme decision. It's difficult to think about. It's terrifying to think about. And for a lot of these people, they're effectively dealing with mental illness of one kind or another that makes it even harder to do rational decisions. And it's such a big decision as well that makes it very difficult. So no, for most victims that are suffering so bad that they'd rather not exist, they're not actually able to make it happen.
It feels a bit hard to call it extreme, but then also want to force it upon everyone that is and isn't suffering.
But you see, existence is already forced on everyone, right? So that's a bad
Sure.
thing.
But
And
not,
that's what we want to
but
stop.
not necessarily, right? Like you don't have children, right? You didn't force existence on anyone.
I don't have any children yet, but yeah, we agree with continuing humanity and reproduction
Okay.
until we've finished helping animals. Because if humanity
Okay.
went extinct, then animals would be screwed.
As a whole, animals wouldn't be screwed, though. I mean, some would, but not all.
Most would be screwed. Yeah.
You think most?
Yeah, over
Like what
99.9% of animals that are born die painfully during infancy. They don't have any sort of life worth living. Would you want to be an animal? Any type of animal? Probably not, right?
Well-
so it's not a good existence. It's not a good experience.
Yeah, so I agree that none of us would want to be animals, but our intelligence and our thought on what life is much different than an animal's intelligence and the way that they look at life, right?
Yeah, because they don't have intelligence. They're more vulnerable than us. They haven't decided to experience this. They've been forced into it by nature, and the harm that comes out as a result is terrible. But nature doesn't care about harm. Nature doesn't care about suffering. It's just a system of propagation.
But we can't honestly say that for sure they would want that, right?
I mean, it doesn't matter what they would want, really. You know, the thing is, if they are objectively experiencing suffering in a way that they'd be better off not existing, then yeah, that's the right thing to do.
But we're the ones deciding that for them. So we don't actually know if they would be better off, right?
Well, we know that suffering exists. We know how extreme it can be, or at least extinctionists do. You know, most people like yourself don't know how extreme suffering can be because you've never thought about it.
I have. I'm pro extinction. I started this whole conversation by saying that.
Okay, I didn't hear that, so fair enough.
Sorry. No, you're fine.
But yeah, I mean, people that are saying like, "Oh, a bit of suffering's fine, leave it," you know, I refuse to accept that they fully understand how bad suffering is. I don't think, I like to think that they're ignorant of it, right? Because if they really understood how bad suffering was and were still happy to condemn others to it, then that would be really, really bad.
Yeah, I'm anti bringing more children in this world. I'm anti having pets. I'm anti. I don't eat meat at the moment, but I know a lot of people still do, and I think that's fine. But again, I think that if we're not working towards a goal of some sort, we're not really fixing any problems.
Well, we are working towards the goal. I mean, our movement isn't effortless, right? Effortless are people that like to philosophize about this and choose actively to do nothing. Extinctionists are activists, right? So we're working to achieve a suffering-free world. You know, we're not just talking about it. We are doing it.
I guess I'll check out the website. Sorry, I didn't actually look at the website before I joined. Sorry, that's on me. I didn't see what preparations and or directions you were working towards on that.
Yeah. By all means, check it out. We've got our FAQ manifesto. You can join our Discord group as well. The link's on the website. Read all about it.
It's always interesting to hear that kind of stuff. Thanks for your time.
Yeah, thanks for coming on.
No problem. Have a good day.
You too. Well, that was a good chat. Who's next? Let's have a look. Here we go. Hello.
Hey, good morning or good afternoon, wherever you are.
Just good afternoon. How are you doing?
I'm doing well, actually. Thanks for asking. So I have a counter argument, so to speak, if you're open to that.
Yeah, perfect.
Sure. Number one is the existence of life justifies its existence. Number two, go ahead.
Sorry. I was going to say, like, how do you mean? But if you want to carry on first, then by all means.
Sure. So for something to come into existence, it takes up space in our universe, and nothing has the right or the privilege or any justification whatsoever to end its existence. Now that it may happen, right? Something could happen that does end its existence, but there is no, I guess, moral conviction or there's nothing that we have as a concept in our minds that says this shouldn't exist, because it does exist. I don't know if you're following me on that.
I'd disagree with that. I'd say that that's really how the world works.
Go ahead.
I mean, most people would say that, child assault shouldn't exist, right? Cancer would be better off not existing.
Right. Better off. But they do exist.
Yeah, but, just because, if I see a criminal attacking someone in the street, I wouldn't say, well, that's existing. So I'll just leave it alone, right?
So maybe you're I don't know if you're trying to deflect or just misunderstanding. So the criminal exists. We have a concept called criminal, someone who does something antisocial or harmful, causes pain, suffering, blah, 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 right?
Yep.
Can you fully eliminate that concept from existence?
I mean, extinction would try and eliminate all types of existence and potential for suffering.
Okay. So let's say you achieve that. Okay. And on some other planet, billions of light years away, the concept appears again.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Would you be able to stop it?
Well, part of our mission is to try and stop that from happening. Yeah.
Okay. So are you not seeing the absurdity
Of what?
of your point of view?
Do you mind pointing it out?
Sure. So what you're proposing, and I'm going to try to steel man this as best as I can, right, is that because suffering exists, that the ones who cause the suffering, animals, whatever, life, all of it needs to end suffering. Is that steel manning you?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, the conditions that exist for suffering to happen, I guess, yeah.
Okay. So what I'm saying is attempting to end all suffering is akin to ending minerals, is an attempt to end the very nature of the universe itself. There is no way you could possibly guarantee that you would end all suffering by eliminating existence on this planet.
Well, like I said, we're we support extraplanetary efforts, and even if you did end all suffering on just Earth, that would still be a good thing, right?
So how do you justify causing suffering in the pursuit to ending suffering?
Because suffering is unacceptable, but obviously you have to choose the lesser of two evils sometimes.
How is causing more suffering when there's already suffering the lesser of two evils?
Well, firstly, we're not necessarily going to cause any suffering, out of the norm. And secondly, if you're preventing billions of years of more suffering, and you have to do a little bit of suffering to cause a bit of suffering to do that, then it mathematically works out very well.
Potentially, right? You're taking an action,
Yeah.
right? You're proposing taking an action.
Yes.
Potentially, your action will add to the suffering that is already in existence. Am I correct?
Potentially, yeah, but you have to try, right?
Sure. What I'm putting out is that from my point of view, right, it's not just a potential. It is an inevitable consequence of your actions that you will cause more suffering.
More suffering than we would prevent. Billions of years.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
I mean, the suffering that would take place over billions of years is so vast that it's...
Right, but you're missing something.
What am I missing?
You're missing that your mission to end all suffering in the universe will take longer than that.
Well, it won't take that long. to.
Okay.
I was speaking.
So you're just deluded.
I didn't finish my sentence correctly.
Go ahead.
So it won't take that long to cause animal extinction on Earth and suffering on Earth.
And to what end would that accomplish?
That would prevent, billions of years of suffering for countless victims
By your estimation.
by just simple facts. Yeah.
Fact of what? What fact?
I mean, do you know what a billion is?
No. What fact do you have that says that suffering will last forever or billions of years?
You know how many zeros a billion has?
You're deflecting. So what fact do you have
You're not understanding basic stuff.
that proves
I need to see.
that suffering will continue for billions of years?
I need to see, what your basic understanding is, because you're clearly struggling quite hard here. So, a billion.
Okay. I'm not struggling, brother. You're just not answering my question.
I am trying, but I'm having to use kid gloves here because you're struggling. So,
Okay. You just keep asserting that.
a billion has 9 zeros. Okay, that's a lot. That's a long time. And when you have, the number of wild animals born each year on the planet is it has something like 18 zeros after it. It's a very large number. So that's the suffering of all of those animals over billions of years is a very large amount. Okay, so hopefully you can understand that. And so any suffering that you might cause with extinction would pale in comparison. It would be, infinitesimal in comparison, right? So it's a very obvious thing in that sense.
Yeah, I think that your delusion is causing you to.
If you can't respond, then don't just start insulting me, right? Try and use some logic. Next caller, please.
Hello.
How's it going?
Pretty good.
Good.
How are you?
Great.
Awesome. So, can I ask you a question?
Yeah, go for it. What do you got?
So, when you say suffering, are you talking about all living creatures?
Yeah.
So, lions.
Future non-living yet creatures as well.
So what will the lions and all the carnivore animals? How do they survive?
By eating other animals.
Isn't that considered a form of suffering?
Yeah.
Okay, so how would you end that?
Euthanasia. So animal extinction, basically. Just have no animals, no suffering.
Okay. So yeah, is this with the understanding that these animals were the creation of God?
No, our movement is atheist.
I kind of had a feeling. So, if I were to make the statement, in the daytime, you like to sunbathe.
Yeah.
How would you know that it was daytime?
Lots of different ways.
Okay, can you give me an example?
By looking at my clock or my watch or looking out the window.
And when you looked out the window, what would you see?
Probably daylight.
Daylight, okay. And how would you know that it was daylight?
I wouldn't necessarily know for a fact.
Would it be light outside? Would that be a safe assumption?
Yeah.
And you know that it's light outside because you have an understanding of what dark looks like, correct?
I suppose so, yeah.
Can you have one without the other?
Yes.
Okay, explain to me how.
Well, for example, in the majority of the universe, actually, you have constant sunlight because you don't have bodies obscuring that light.
No rotation.
Yeah, I mean, if you're just in space, for example, just chilling in space in the solar system, you're probably going to have constant.
So if you only had a perspective that it was always light, then it would just be what? It would just be, right?
It would be out of context, I guess. Yeah.
Yes. And so herein lies the problem with your synopsis is a system of duality in nature is exactly what I think the previous guest was talking about, but maybe didn't articulate it very well.
You definitely didn't articulate anything very well, but I mean, the thing is, like, appealing. Nature doesn't have feelings, right? And nature isn't the one suffering. Nature doesn't need help. It doesn't need moral consideration. It doesn't matter if nature stops existing to nature because nature doesn't have feelings, right? So nature is just a worthless, meaningless thing, unless you're using it for your benefit or something, right?
Yeah, but when you look to nature, you have to at least be willing to recognize it for the binary duality of being balanced, right? So it couldn't be more of one thing than the other because then it would be out of balance and then it wouldn't work. So when you look at you being part of that said nature, came from that said nature, then you as well are going to be a system of balance within the bigger system, and that is where we get the system of duality.
Yeah, no, I'm disagreeing. So I think that the balance is a myth, right? We don't have any balance. We just have what was thrown at the wall and stuck, basically, and then calling it balance. There's no balance where over 99% of animals die cruelly in childhood, right? And have a terrible experience. There's no balance there.
So let me ask you another question. So if there's a static charge in the air, the ether, the clouds, whatever you want to refer it as, right? Like, does a lightning bolt exist without a negative?
But this is very abstract, right? So I mean, we have to apply it to
It's not abstract.
Well, it is.
It,
We have to. It is. We have to stay
it's a
grounded.
yes or a no.
Well, it's very abstract, right? So let's stay grounded in reality.
Oh,
Okay.
there it is, grounded. You
Yeah.
said it. You answered the question without trying to answer the question. That is exactly right. So positive charge, right?
But we're not talking about lightning or nature. We're talking
Well,
about
no, we're talking about balance. You have to have a negative and or a
why.
positive
What's
to
so good about this?
complete.
What balance are you talking about, though? Right? A balance that allows babies to get abused. That's not a good balance, and there is no balance that makes that okay.
So the morality that you are referring to is only subjective to the negative. You
No.
would not know or have a concept of morality as you see it as good if there wasn't anything opposing to your good as
But
being bad, is
basically,
my
you're
point.
just defending babies getting abused, right?
No. Let's make it very clear. I haven't said anything about babies. You're the only one talking about babies. What I'm talking about is
Babies are the
nature.
majority
What
of
I'm
the
talking
population.
about is the universal knowledge of duality and binary, because even our own sun has a binary sun. Even our own.
I'm kind of bored of this, right? Um, let's focus on reality, the actual topic at hand, which is life forms and their suffering. This abstract duality and balance. This obfuscation, it's confusion, right? It's a way of distracting and not talking about the, for him, uncomfortable topic of the reality at hand, which is the majority of life born on this planet is essentially babies getting abused. Also, hedonista, I'm not an antinatalist, so, maybe do better. Right, so let's continue on. Hello.
Howdy.
How's it going?
So you want to euthanize all species on the planet Earth?
Yeah.
Okay, well, congrats. You have officially ended suffering. But the question we have to ask is that justified? Is ending all suffering through ending all life on the planet, is that a more valuable outcome than experience itself? Because as far as we know, there's no other life in the universe. We can guess that there is. So you could very well be ending all life in the universe. The only opportunity for life in the universe, the only opportunity for the universe to experience itself and observe itself. So I don't understand where you get to this end, where it's like you're essentially taking the concept of ending suffering to its greatest extreme by ending all of experience itself.
Because we're not talking about a little bit of suffering. We're talking about, completely unacceptable suffering. Babies abused, tortured, right, eaten alive. It's not some sort of suffering that you can just trade for a bit of fun, right? You wouldn't condemn a baby to be tortured so that you could have fun, right? I mean, hopefully you wouldn't.
No, but here's
that's it, right? There is no
it's not.
meaning.
Can I finish? Can I finish? So, I would, in this kind of conversation, I would herald back to philosophers like Albert Camus, where we might not be able to find meaning in our existence, but we choose to experience life because the experience of life and our choice of how we respond to things like suffering without meaning are what truly matters. The way that we react to that, the way that we work against that, is what truly matters in this world.
So you're saying that some people have a good life, right? And that's a good.
I'm saying
but you're not considering those that have a bad life, right? And
I am considering. So there was a philosopher.
Why should anyone have to suffer just so that others can have fun? Right, that's an inherently immoral system.
Have you ever read the works of Viktor Frankl?
No.
Viktor Frankl was a philosopher, and he was also a Holocaust survivor.
Yeah.
And he came out of that writing, and he wrote out after surviving the Holocaust, after going through what we could call one of the worst humanitarian crises ever, by a lot of standards, and he wrote about the goodness that he found in the humanity of the other people
of the Holocaust. Jesus, is this the depths that we're stooping to now?
It's not depths. This is real philosophical work.
You think the Holocaust is a good thing?
No, you're not listening, and you're misrepresenting what I'm saying.
You're saying it was acceptable, basically.
It wasn't acceptable. It wasn't acceptable. What I'm saying is Viktor Frankl wrote about the humanity and the goodness that he found with others that he had around him.
The lucky ones might be able to find coping mechanisms, right? That's all you're describing. Coping mechanisms for dealing with being forced into a terrible situation. And yeah, the thing is, the dead don't write books.
The dead may not write books.
Yeah, because they died, right? So you're just hearing the nonsense of the survivors and their coping mechanisms. And
the nonsense of the survivors. Yeah. One of the greatest philosophers of modern times. That is nonsense.
In your opinion, right?
In your opinion, that's what you just said. Viktor Frankl.
Yeah, in your opinion,
is nonsense.
Look, I think that if you're essentially downplaying and justifying suffering, then yeah, he's
not justifying it. He's talking about.
You are saying that some lucky ones survived and found a way to be happy after. That's all you're saying, right? There's no great thing to this. What you're saying, it's just someone found a way to be happy despite that terrible thing. But most of them didn't, right? So you're not thinking about the unlucky ones. You're thinking about like the top 1%, the privileged, the
Top
lucky.
1%. It's not necessarily the
Most
top
of the people who went to
1%.
the camps didn't
It
escape.
comes down to when you are in a bad situation, when you are experiencing suffering that is meaningless, the thing that a human can control is not when they can't
Humans are the
control.
minority on this planet.
Can you shut the fuck up and stop interrupting me?
I mean, no. Like, you're talking nonsense. You're talking about a tiny minority. You're trying to justify the Holocaust, and you want me to shut up? How about no? All right, let's see if we can get a smarter person. Hello.
Hello there. Hello.
How's it going?
Good. I spoke to you last time. I mentioned I'm anti-natalist, and I think you said it was like something like a band-aid on the situation.
I would describe it more as opting out of the system instead of fighting it.
Okay, fair enough. But to you, I would say, my friend, why not just opt out yourself? Like, why not just delete yourself? Is it because you're so committed to your cause?
I wouldn't say so committed, but I am committed to the cause. Yeah, I mean, if I opted out, then that would potentially cause, and allow for more suffering, right? We have to end the system of suffering, and to opt out of that is to allow the system to keep causing suffering. So, unless you're fighting the system, then you're supporting the system, and you're supporting all the suffering and victimization.
How okay? I would like for you to mention how being like anti-natalist, how it is supporting the system just by not participating.
Yeah, so antinatalists are breeding themselves out of existence and leaving the world to horny sadists, basically. So they're essentially saying, the world is too terrible for me to bring a child into it, but I'm going to do nothing to stop other children being brought into it, and potentially forever.
Well, that I would love that answer. I would love the answer of like how I should stop other people from doing it.
Yeah, so we need an active solution. A passive solution like antinatalism is self-defeating. It's never going to work. We are actively working towards extinction with the pro-extinction movement, and everyone else is saying, I don't want to actively work towards that, which is an unrealistic way of getting towards it, right? So we're the ones saying no, inaction is not good enough. We need to be active. So we're growing the movement.
So what does that mean? What is it? Are you gonna force us through legislation? Are you gonna be? Or how? Tell us. I mean, we could all look up your website, but I mean, come on. We're looking up your live right now. We don't know.
Yeah, so there's lots of different plans that we're working on, and lots of different ways that things could turn out, right? So I can't tell you that there's going to be a war 50 years from now. I can't tell you that we'll find a peaceful way to do it, although we would obviously prioritize looking at a peaceful way to do it, and that is what we are doing. So we're looking at spreading the message, growing the movement, even getting our more empathetic genetics out there into the population, less animalistic genetics like most people have. So yeah, we're working on lots of solutions, and ideally peaceful. But if
ideally peaceful, like people with guns are going to be like okay with you trying to stop reproduction.
So, we're in favor of human reproduction at the minute, right? Humanity is the vehicle for ending suffering for animals and other life. So, we actually want a strong and healthy humanity for now.
Oh, really?
Yeah. If humanity went extinct today, animals would be screwed, right?
Well, yeah, we wouldn't have this conversation.
Correct.
So you want a healthy human reproduction for now?
Yeah, like I said, if humanity goes extinct, then animals would suffer terribly, and it wouldn't be fair.
And then we'll just all opt out at a certain point.
Yeah, I can't tell you exactly what's going to happen in the future, but we have to be on the side of zero suffering. We have to be on the side of the victims, basically. That's what it's about.
Oh, well, I'm just trying to understand. You want to end animal suffering first.
Yeah, animals can't help themselves, right?
So humans should go plant-based.
It's more about we need to remove dependency on animals completely. If all animals went extinct tomorrow, then the planet wouldn't be habitable. So there's a lot of work to do to remove animals and the dependency on animals. It's not going to happen overnight. It's not going to be an easy thing. It's going to take a lot of work, and actually doing things for a good cause instead of what the current system is, which is just selfish and capitalist.
Well, what's the next step? What's your next step for us, for humans, for us humans who are trying to limit suffering?
So, yeah, we would want the best. If everyone was extinctionist tomorrow, or let's just say if extinctionists ruled the world tomorrow, and not everyone was extinctionist, but it was an extinctionist government, let's say, we would try and improve conditions for humanity. We would probably we might get rid of money or something. We would try and have less tribalism, less waste, right? We think of all the resources spent on the military, right? You talking?
Yeah, exactly. I agree, but what's the next step? Like, what should I do as a civilian trying to further extinction?
Yeah, so we are constantly looking for activists and for people to join the movement and help us grow. So all of our activists are essentially, we don't have all of the answers at the minute, so we can't tell you what method is going to be used for extinction, but we're on the side of zero suffering, right? We're on the team. And we're trying to grow that team, grow the movement. So our activists are putting out videos. I've done several guides on how to easily put out videos on TikTok and YouTube, for example, to try and spread the message and grow the movement.
To do what, man? Like, what next steps should we take?
Well, finding the answer to that question is equally as important, right? The movement's very small at the minute, so it's difficult to be able to do serious research and to answer every single last question when it's still a very small and resource limited movement, right? Think of bigger movements like veganism. They've got millions, if not billions, at their disposal. They have loads of people, loads of resources.
Why not go to veganism? I think that's where you should be going if that's what you're talking about. Is extinction. Like, we should stop killing things, right? Stop killing animals.
Well, the thing is that at the minute, veganism actually causes more suffering to wild animals. Yeah, veganism essentially allows for reforestation, for example, and creates more space for wild animals to suffer worse than farmed animals do. So at the minute, veganism.
Veganism cause more harm than good. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. Until we have an animal-free planet and have removed our dependency on animals, yes, veganism actually causes worse suffering, and you can
So
see.
you're saying like
You can read all about.
let's trickle down to vegetarianism and trickle down to veganism, trickle down to less animal harm, trickle down to full human like depopulation.
So the plan is essentially remove the animal populations on the planet and our dependency on them. See if it's possible to do extinction for the universe, and to do as much as possible. So that mission is almost unlimited in scope, but we have to research it and see how much is possible and how far our moral obligation extends, basically.
Moral obligation. Moral obligation. We should be vegan. According to you, we should cut out killing animals of any kind. We should harm nothing. We should. I mean, if all of us went vegan, we would get to your goal very quickly.
Right, but veganism doesn't account for wild animals and their suffering, and they are the vast majority of the population. So actually, veganism, doesn't really help many life forms.
How am I going to stop them? How would we stop nature? Tell me.
That's what extinctionism is all about. It's. I mean, we already control nature, right? We deforest. We, build factories, data centers. We take up water and resources. We have mining operations, right? So, clear.
Okay, so veganism should be the next step, according to you.
Like I say, veganism. Firstly, it causes more suffering, and secondly, it does nothing to actually address suffering properly. Veganism is just essentially saying, don't eat animals, right? But that's it's meaningless, really.
Well, why? Why? That's the first step towards not harming other species.
Well, no. The thing is our direct harm isn't more important than harm that's happening without us causing it, right? So that's a myth, actually, that humans cause all of the harm. Nature does most of the harm.
No, it's just what we can do. What's our job? You have proextinction.com.
Yeah.
What's our next step? What can we do?
I mean, firstly, you have to agree with extinction, right?
Okay, if we did, I'm saying hypothetically, then what's the next step that we could do?
So the first step is growing the movement to make it possible for the movement to achieve.
Yeah, why would I care? Why would I care to spread a movement towards telling people?
Right. A lot of trolls today. A lot of trolls. Go and read the website, bro. Like, what the hell do you want from me? I've already told you, right? We have to grow the movement to make it more possible to achieve our goals. The movement is too small to achieve anything at the minute. Like, we're not going to cause extinction as a small movement. It's not realistic. We might be able to do it, but the bigger the movement is, the better. The more resources the movement has, the better. You can't open a laboratory and start doing research if you don't have the resources to do it. Veganism as a movement, for example, is massive. They've got organizations, they've got charity, they've got millions, if not billions of dollars, and people willing to. They've got scientists, they've got people doing scientific papers for them, and all sorts of stuff. So if you can't understand that a movement has to grow to be able to achieve its objectives, then we don't want you in the movement anyway, because you're going to be useless, right? I mean, that's just such an obvious thing. When the movement contacted me and tried to explain it and get me on board, my first kind of immediate understanding was, right, okay, let's make some videos, let's make some social media pages, let's start doing activism, let's grow the movement, because that is the first and most important step. Duh. God, guys, come on. It's not hard. Right. Inviting somebody on. That guy was trolling, by the way, whether he realized it or not. And the worst thing is, he probably didn't realize it. Bless him. All right, let's take a look at the queue. See what's going on. Oh, that's cute. We've got that crazy vegan teacher. Who else have we got? Got some people watching we can invite. But yeah, the most important thing is you have to agree with extinction. You have to accept and understand that, we should end all suffering, that it's wrong to allow more victims and suffering, that, there's no real harm or downside to not continuing the existence of the privileged. To them, it's the end of the world. It's like, the worst thing that could happen. But they don't give a shit about the victims and their suffering. In fact, they're, happy to allow it and for it to continue. But yeah, veganism actually causes more suffering. Funnily enough, we have that crazy vegan teacher, I think maybe watching right now. And she actually came into our WhatsApp activist group and said she was pro-extinction. She was lying. And, she said, why aren't you all vegans? Go vegan now. And we said, we have proof, evidence that veganism actually is worse, causes a lot more suffering. And we said, please go and look at this page on our website. It has all the data, the graphs, all the information, and just go and have a look and then let us know what you think. She didn't do that and kept trolling, and we had to ban her from our WhatsApp group.
Hello. This prompt raises the question, does this affect beings that may not have a conscious? Because you cannot fully understand the consciousness of things that may or may not exist. So if you were to end all life, then you would be destroying the work of either theism or science.
The first half of your question sounded excellent, but I'm not sure about the last half. But yeah, bacteria, for example, that should go extinct. Maybe they suffer on some level. Who knows? But they could also redevelop into more complex life, which would suffer worse potentially. So yeah, you have to have extinctionism isn't just about causing some sort of extinction event and then just hoping it'll never happen again. It's about essentially going to the ends of the earth, if you will, and doing absolutely everything possible, trying to achieve the highest safety rate of no more existence, no more suffering, no more victims. So say again, sorry?
What would be safe? If no life exists, then nothing would be safe.
Well, everything would be safe, right? From being forced to exist and from suffering.
Well, there wouldn't be anything to protect, so nothing is safe.
Well, safe from what, though, right? They'd be safe from suffering.
No, they'd be safe from nothing.
They'd be in nothing, I guess.
Well, if there would be no life, then there is nothing, like, at all. You have to think about that. Because the idea that, like, you're conceptualizing suffering with being something, like, to do with life. You're saying that only life or things that have a living process can suffer. But, like, you gotta realize that stress can occur through science for, like, maybe an atom. So you are, like, just only... Hold on, I'm in my game. Hold on, bro. Right here. So you're saying that only you're protecting living things from suffering, but the only actual idea is you won't be protecting anything because the want to live would be a direct contradiction with like that. Because like, what if I wanted to live and wanted to suffer? Would it be fair to kill me?
It's more about you could go and reproduce, and that child could have a terrible life, right? So it's about having as close to 0% chance of suffering as possible.
0% chance, like for net good, for like everyone, or just one person?
Yeah, I mean, what's the worst thing in the world? Who are the worst victims of the world? It's the ones that are forced into a life of extreme suffering, right? And the worst suffering. So,
To kill them, though.
say again?
I don't think the answer is to kill them.
Well, I mean, in a lot of cases, that is already the answer, right? At a vet, they will euthanize animals. Lots of humans get euthanized already around the world. So, it's already the world that we live in.
I mean, do you believe in justification or no?
The thing is, right, it's kind of upside down at the minute, right? People like yourself are saying it's fine to let all of these life forms be forced to exist and to suffer terrible lives so that we can have fun. So that's the immoral position. The extinctionist position is saying nobody should be forced to exist and suffer a life of effectively hell so that some privileged lucky ones can have fun.
Well, I think it's more. I think you're being the one who's moral here because just because one person or yeah, I mean, I know a lot of people suffer, but that doesn't give justification to kill everyone now. Because like, some people don't have horrible lives. It doesn't mean you should net kill everyone. It doesn't matter. And not all life suffers. There's processes that all life forms go through that not every possible life can possibly suffer. That doesn't mean like if every life had a chance to suffer, that doesn't mean you should kill everything to prevent suffering because suffering is a part of like development. There would be no development in human history. If you believe in evolution, then evolution would not occur without suffering. So if you're saying that we shouldn't have existed, then that'd just be nihilism.
Think of it like this, okay? Let's say you've got a selfish person has forced another life to exist, and sent them to hell so that they can go to heaven, right? And despite this incredibly evil act, they're enjoying heaven, they're having a great time. But extinctionists or some people on the outside are watching this and they're horrified that this person is being tortured nonstop, and the other person is allowing it so that they can have fun. Okay, that is it's simple morality, it's simple ethics, it's basic. It's not hard to understand. That is what extinctionism is about. It's saying that no one should have to suffer and be tortured just so that some others can have fun. Okay.
So how would you solve that? By killing other people or by killing yourself?
So for animals, it would most likely be euthanasia. Euthanasia is something that's already done around the world. It's already done ethically. It's about preventing and stopping suffering and pain, and giving safety from suffering. But that's the only way essentially to stop more life from being forced into the universe to suffer, right? So
Someone else the right to kill someone else because I might not want to die, but someone else wants to kill me because they're pro-extinction. Why would I allow that? That doesn't seem very moral. Because there's not objectiveness in your like moral positioning, and your moral positioning requires objective like belief in that, and that cannot possibly you can't possibly. That'd be like being in what it's called utopian society where everyone does the exact same, even though utopian can't exist because there'd still be ranks. So there'd still be ranks in this. What does it give someone else the right to kill me because they don't want me to suffer? Would I not be suffering if I'm dead?
Well, no. Firstly, no. So the thing is, the continued existence of one life form is less important than the prevention of extreme suffering of another life form.
Could you substantiate that?
Yeah, I mean, it's simple, right? Would you send someone to hell just so that you could go to heaven, right?
Your mic's cutting out.
Yeah, would you send someone to hell just so that you could go to heaven?
No.
Right. Hopefully, yeah, you'd say no. So it's as simple as that, right? No one should have to suffer just so that others can have fun.
Yeah, but if you were to kill someone, do you think you'd go to heaven? Because you prevented their suffering in a way.
Well, firstly, we're atheists. I'm just using examples, okay? But yeah, there's far less harm and suffering caused to someone that passes away than there is to someone that's trapped in a life of extreme pain and misery and agony and suffering. And also, that passing away can very well be done painlessly and ethically, and in a way that's not even that bad. Lots of people on their deathbed, for example, they can accept it, or the euthanasia that is applied to them, is ultimately for their own good, ends their suffering, prevents suffering, right? So there's no great harm that continues
So
on.
other people, you are preventing suffering through, but like you're not putting yourself through emotional distress now. Do you have like no reaction when you were to kill someone, or would that suffer more? So you're just causing more suffering by killing other people because people actually care about those people. That's like assuming that no one cares about that person. Like the idea of killing yourself is the most selfish thing you can do, and that's a fact. Because if I were to kill myself, people would probably care. I mean, maybe nobody in here, but because other people care, that's like assuming that nobody cares about each other. But like that's not true.
Can you apply any of this to wild animals?
Animals, yeah, animals imprint on each other. Like a baby cares about their mother. Maybe you could use it like that. It's true. I mean, the dogs have processes. My dog loved me. It's true.
But none of that has priority over the prevention of the worst thing, right? So you're talking about like survival. That's effectively what most people do. What most animals try to do is just survive, right? They're not in heaven. So heaven's not even a real thing, and no one's even close to it. The vast majority of the population doesn't get anything like that, especially if you account for animals. But the suffering is extreme. It's terrible. So even on just that basis, the suffering greatly outweighs the pleasure in the world. And the suffering that you can experience greatly outweighs the pleasure that you can experience. But even in an idealistic sort of scenario for people where there's just one child being abused so that lots of others can have fun, that's still bad, right? One child suffering and being tortured, it's not justifiable, right? And essentially, the people that are advocating for this are saying that we should have a world where people are happy for a child to be tortured and to ignore it and to have fun, knowing that this is happening, and essentially either laughing at the child maybe, or just ignoring the child who's crying and screaming. It's a disgusting position. Empathetic and responsible people would never allow it. And people essentially appeal to selfish life forms having fun at their expense as somehow being justifiable. It's gross, it's wrong, and it allows for unlimited amounts of suffering. It's a position that has no upper limit on the suffering that they justify, or the extremity of the suffering that they justify. It's
So you're saying like abortion could prevent suffering, basically, like on a high level. So like, what if my wife gave birth to the person to cure cancer and actually cured the reason for suffering without killing everybody? Then what have you done by killing that baby?
well, I mean, that's not really an accurate representation of the context. So we're actually in favor of...
The position is extremely inaccurate because that's like a biased point of view, right?
Okay. So, we're not actually in favor of humanity going extinct. So, that already knocks that on the head. It's got to be in context, right? These sort of hypotheticals that are out of context are incredibly unhelpful, really. The best way to engage on this topic is to deal with the actual situations and the reality that we're dealing with. If you keep trying to warp it into something else, like, oh, what about thunder? That has to have a negative charge and a positive. It's just ridiculous. It's not talking about the actual topic, essentially. Okay. Hello.
Hey, how's it going?
I'm good. How are you?
I am good. I don't have a ton of time, but you mentioned euthanasia, and I'm just curious, like, what form of euthanasia are you talking about specifically? I'm a veterinarian, so I was just sorry, I got to clear my throat. My bad. So yeah, I was just kind of like curious, like, what form of euthanasia you were actually alluding to.
Yeah, I don't know, actually.
And that's okay. So typically you're thinking of barbiturate associated euthanasia, things like sodium pentobarbital, which essentially reduces nervous function to suppress the respiratory center. You go unconscious. You go unconscious before you stop breathing. Hypoxia is the COD, cause of death, unaliving, right? So there's other forms of euthanasia, and we all talk about in the veterinary world the ethics of this. And so we have different groups like the AVMA or the USDA to, essentially approve what we can use as forms of euthanasia, be that like a gunshot to the heart of a cow or like a dog being euthanized with barbiturates. My kind of issue with where we're at with like, I get extinctionism. I get, I'm not an extinctionist, but I get where you're coming from with your, philosophy and debating and whatnot. But like, I just don't think we're feasibly there yet where you could eliminate suffering without mass suffering. Like for wild animals, domestic animals, anything, you're going to have to round these up. So I'm just kind of curious, are you talking about like over a long time span this would occur?
Yeah, so it's an interesting question, but our position is mostly that you can't realistically cause more suffering than you prevent with extinction. So even a painful extinction, if that was the only way to do it, would still be a net benefit, basically.
Yeah, my kind of issue with that is like, okay, so like not utopia, wrong word. The ideal scenario would be like the Halo rings from like the Halo universe. Are you familiar with the video games?
I'm not really, no.
Oh, it's nerdy. But essentially imagine just like sci-fi universe, super technology made by like an ancient alien race that can eliminate all life in the universe, essentially, right? You activate it and it just, instantaneously, I snap my fingers there. I don't know if you could hear, or like the Infinity Gauntlet from Marvel, right? Like Thanos. Do you know that? Like how he can snap his fingers and he just chose delete all life. Like, I think if you take that as like the ideal and you compare that to like 400 BC, where it'd be like, people walking around with bronze swords, there'd be no barbiturate euthanasia, right? Like it would be just people whacking things. I think that, I guess my issue with your guys' stance of the means justify the ends is we can put that on a temporal scale and see that the means would be reduced with advancement in technology. So like, I do think that there's an argument to be made that like, if you're going to talk about total suffering and care about it that much, like if the means to an end could be better in the future, like, does that make sense? Like, I'm not great at like debating, but
I hear what you're saying, but no, the thing is that ignores all of the suffering that would happen in the meantime, right?
And that's I think what it gets down to is like, we just have I'm more of like the, Renaissance kind of style where I think, suffering defines meaning to some extent. But I think there's big arguments to be made when you're talking about non higher consciousness species, right? Like, is the suffering of a squirrel, like I can have some hardships in my life that make me, learn about myself and then I go help others. But like if a squirrel is trapped in a trap or a squirrel breaks its leg, right? It's not going to learn about, I have to lift extra hard, and that's taught me about hard work. It's just going to be in pain. And so I get what you're saying. And I really, like, I didn't come up here, to be honest, to like argue the mainness of it. I don't have a ton of time this morning. And, I like that you have a philosophy that you're like arguing, to be honest. I think that's cool. But my one thing is just that I mainly hopped up because you were saying like the word euthanasia, and I saw it in the comments and stuff. And so I think, I'm not trying to be like, oh, help you or something like that. I don't care, man. You seem cool. Go on with your life. But just for like educational wise, there's like different forms of euthanasia. Pentobarbital, barbiturates are going to be the most commonly used ones when you're referring to veterinary euthanasia. And I will hop down. Yeah, I will take that comment. Sorry, I didn't mean to waste time or anything, man.
No, that's great. Thanks for coming up.
I peace out.
Cheers. All right, I am going to take... I'm really tempted to take the phone to the toilet because I need a wee, but I feel like that would be wrong somehow, that I shouldn't do it. So maybe I should just come back in a few minutes. BRB.